Waitress was shot protecting a stranger, not knowing he was the Italian mafia boss. The rain did not just fall, it attacked the Baltimore harbor, driving cold needles against the glass of the Harbor Light Diner. It was 3:30 in the morning. The diner's neon sign, a flickering pink anchor, hissed and popped, casting sick light on the wet asphalt. Inside, the air was thick with the competing smells of burnt coffee, old grease, and the metallic tang of diesel fuel drifting from the container port across the street. Sarah Dalton wiped the counter for the 10th time that shift, the rag moving in tired circles. The graveyard shift paid the bills, barely, but it was a lonely, grinding existence. Only 2 customers remained: a long-haul trucker nursing a coffee in booth 4, his face lit by the glow of his phone, and the man who had walked in 20 minutes ago. He sat at the far end of the counter, nursing nothing. He wore a heavy black wool pea coat, the collar turned up, though it was not cold inside. He had not ordered, just nodded when she approached. His stillness was what caught her attention. In a place defined by movement ships, trucks, people running from something, he was an island of absolute calm. His eyes, when they had briefly met hers, were dark and unreadable. The world dissolved in a crash of sound and glass. It was not a single gunshot, but a rapid, suppressed burst, thwack, thwack, thwack. The front window exploded inward. The glass sugar dispenser in front of the stranger vaporized into a crystalline cloud. Sarah did not think. She was already moving. Years of balancing hot plates and catching falling mugs translated into a different kind of reflex. She saw the stranger start to rise, and she lunged, grabbing the front of his expensive coat and pulling him down with her own weight, shouting, "Get down!" The third bullet was the one meant for his head. Instead, it found her. It felt like a hot poker jabbed into her side, a searing, electric pain that stole her breath. It ripped through her pale blue uniform just above the hip, grazed the bone of her ribs, and buried itself in the formica counter behind her. She collapsed on top of the stranger, the smell of gunpowder and his clean, cold scent filling her nose. The diner was suddenly silent, save for the hiss of the rain and the high-pitched ringing in her ears. The stranger did not panic. His movements were fluid and economical. One strong hand was already on her back, the other pushing her head down, shielding her. He shifted them both lower behind the steel counter. She could feel the solid muscle of his chest against her cheek. He brought his face close to her ear. His eyes, inches away, were not panicked. They were assessing. Sharp and terrifyingly composed. He put one finger to his lips, a clear, silent command, Im Lang, "Stay quiet." He held her there for 10 seconds, perhaps 20, listening. Then, as swiftly as he had appeared, he was gone. He did not use the front door. He moved through the kitchen pass-through, silent as smoke, and vanished into the loading dock alley, just as the first distant wail of sirens began to bleed into the night. Sarah was left gasping, clutching her side. The trucker in booth 4 was shouting into his phone, his hands shaking. He had been recording a video message for his family, and his camera had caught the entire, blurry 10-second event, the window shattering. And Sarah Dalton, the diner waitress, throwing herself in front of a ghost. The clip would be circulating on trucker forums and encrypted chats by dawn, a piece of dockside lore, but it would never touch the 6 o'clock news. By the time the cops arrived, Sarah was already being loaded into an ambulance. The question started before the EMT had even cut her uniform away. They were not the only ones asking. 2 men arrived at the hospital while she was getting stitched. They were not Baltimore PD. They wore cheap suits, but their armbands were crisp, bearing an unfamiliar acronym in stark blue letters, FOTU, Federal Organized Threats Unit. "Sarah Dalton," the taller one asked. He did not wait for an answer. "The man in the pea coat, describe him." I did not get a good look." She lied. It was not a lie. She'd seen nothing but his eyes. "He said nothing, gave you nothing," the second man pushed, his voice like gravel. No, nothing. He just ran." They did not believe her. They pressed her, hard, until the attending nurse threatened to call security. They left, but not before the taller one glanced back, his eyes lingering on her with a look that was not official, but proprietary. Back at the diner, the owner, Sal, was a wreck, chain-smoking by the busted window. He told the police he saw nothing, but Sarah had seen him watching a specific vehicle earlier that night, a white utility van, no markings, parked across the street for 3 solid hours. It was sloppy, and Sarah, a creature of observation, had memorized the plate out of sheer boredom. Maryland license, Juliet Victor Tango 491. It was gone now. At checkout, the emergency room administrator looked confused. "Miss Dalton, your bill, it seems it has been paid in advance." "Paid by who? My insurance barely covers a bandage." The administrator checked the file. "By a wire transfer from a fiduciary, the Maritime Relief and Heritage Trust." Sarah had never heard of it. No one had. She took a cab back to her small apartment, the painkillers making the world swim. Her side throbbed with every bump. In the locker room, changing out of her blood-stiffened spare uniform, her fingers brushed against something hard in her apron pocket. It was not her tip money. She pulled it out. It was a coin, heavy, gold, and old. It was warm, as if it had been held for a long time. On one side, a detailed, old-fashioned ship's anchor was embossed into the metal. On the other side, dominating the face, was a single, stylized letter M. She had not put it there. The stranger had, in those few seconds, pressed together behind the counter. He had slipped it into her pocket, a payment marker. Sarah Dalton stared at the coin, the rain lashing against her window. She did not know that the FOTU was a ghost agency, or that the Maritime Trust was a shell. And she did not know that the man whose life she had saved, the man with the calm, dark eyes, was Matteo Mancini, the unseen capo who controlled the arteries of the entire eastern seaboard, from the cranes to the containers. And she had just become the one thing he could not afford to witness. The stitches in Sarah's side pulled every time she breathed too deeply. It had been 3 days since the shooting, 3 days of cheap painkillers, replaying the explosion of glass, and checking the locks on her flimsy apartment door. She had hidden the gold coin in a bottle of expired aspirin. It felt like it was burning a hole in her medicine cabinet. On the 4th day, a knock came. It was not the usual thud of a neighbor or the landlord. It was a polite, measured rap, rap, rap. She opened it on the chain. A man stood in the dim, water-stained hallway. He was not the stranger from the diner, yet he was. The peacoat was gone, replaced by a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a simple white shirt, no tie. His hair was not matted with rain, but neatly combed. It was his eyes, the same impossible calm, the same assessing depth. "Miss Dalton," he said. His voice was smooth, a low baritone that carried an unmistakable musicality. The edges of his words were rounded, a clear, high-quality Italian accent he made no effort to hide. "My name is Mr. Bell. I am an insurance adjuster and following up on the incident at the Harbor Light." Sarah kept the chain on. "The hospital said the bill was paid." "This is not about the bill. This is about liability. May I come in?" She did not want to, but the authority in his voice was not a request. She unhooked the chain. He stepped inside, and her tiny, one-room apartment suddenly felt claustrophobic. He did not look at the peeling wallpaper or the threadbare rug. He only looked at her. "You are healing," he stated. It was not a question. "I am fine. What do you want?" He stood by the window, looking down at the street, his back to her. "I came to apologize." Sarah almost laughed. "Apologize for what, Mr. Bell the liability?" He turned. The polite mask of Mr. Bell dropped. The man from the diner was fully present. "For bringing the storm to your door. Miss Dalton, those bullets were not intended for you." "They were for you," she said, her voice flat. "Yes. Who are you?" He paused, a flicker of something regret, perhaps in his eyes, I am the man you saved." He took a step closer. "You are in danger. The men who did this, they do not leave loose ends. I want to take you somewhere safe, just for a few days, until I can resolve the situation." Sarah crossed her arms, wincing as the movement pulled her stitches. "Somewhere safe, like your Maritime Relief Trust? I am not stupid. I am not some girl you can buy off with a paid hospital bill and move around like a chess piece. This is not a game." "It is to me," she shot back, her fear turning to anger. "I just want to go back to work. I have bills to pay, my mother's medication, my brother's tuition. That is my life. I do not have time for your storm." His gaze was intense. He seemed to be memorizing her face, her defiance. "You are very brave, Sarah. Braver than you are wise." He reached into his pocket and placed a small, white business card on her cracked laminate counter. It was blank, except for a 10-digit phone number. "When you change your mind." He left. The hallway felt empty, and her apartment felt colder. She did not change her mind. She threw the card in the trash. She would go to work the next night, stitches or no stitches. That night, the fear returned. She woke up at 2 a.m, convinced she heard a noise. She dismissed it as the building settling, but when she got up to get water, she saw it. Her deadbolt was broken. The wood of the door jamb was splintered. She froze, her heart climbing into her throat. Someone had been inside. She scanned the room. Her small television was still there. The $53 in her cookie jar was untouched. She ran to the bathroom, her sides screaming in protest, and ripped open the medicine cabinet. The aspirin bottle was on its side, the cap off, the pills spilled. The gold coin was gone. They had not been looking for money. They had been looking for the M. She was shaking now, dialing 911. When a frantic pounding started on her door, it was Mrs. Petrov, her elderly neighbor from 2B. "Sarah, you are all right," the old woman whispered, clutching her floral housecoat. "They came again. The men in black. 2 of them. They knocked on my door, asked for you, said they were federal." Did they come in here?" Sarah whispered. "They said it was a security check for the gas line. I told them you were not home." Sarah's blood ran cold. She hung up on the police dispatcher. Cops could not help her. The Fodu were the ones hunting her. She called her landlord, a man she had met twice, to tell him her lock was broken. "You break it, you buy it," he slurred over the line. "And do not call me this late again. Dalton, I am thinking about raising the rent, effective the 1st, a $200 increase." The line clicked dead. She was trapped. No money, no safety, and now no home. She sank onto her busted sofa, her head in her hands, and saw the white van. It was parked across the street, under the flickering streetlight, same as the night of the shooting. Juliet Victor Tango 491. They were watching her. Right now. The blank business card was still in the trash. She dug it out and dialed. It rang only once. Yes. "They were here," she said, her voice trembling. "They broke my lock. They took the coin." A pause. Then, "Look out your window." "What?" "Are they still there?" "The van." "Yes, it is. It is right there." "Stay away from the window," his voice commanded, suddenly hard as steel. "I'm coming up. Do not open the door for anyone else." Less than 5 minutes later, a different knock. Rap, rap, rap. She opened it. He was there. Flanked by a second man, a mountain with a scarred face who remained in the hallway. He walked past her, his eyes taking in the splintered door, the ransacked bathroom. He was carrying a small tablet. "You need to see this," he said. He tapped the screen. It was security footage, grainy, from a camera hidden in the light fixture in her hallway. She had not even known it was there. It showed the 2 Fodu agents picking her lock. It showed them leaving. 20 minutes later, then he swiped, and the footage changed. It showed her, leaving for the hospital, coming home, Mrs. Petrov going for her mail. "My man," he gestured to the hallway, "installed this 48 hours ago. You've been watched by more than one group." You were spying on me. Sarah felt violated all over again. I was protecting you, he corrected, his voice low. I failed. My presence has put a target on you. My apologies are insufficient. Who are you? She demanded, the anger returning. Not Mr. Bell, not the Maritime Trust. Who are you? He looked at her, a long, heavy silence stretching between them. My name is Matteo Mancini. The name meant nothing to her, a name. And the coin? It is a segno, a marker, he explained. In my world, it signifies that the bearer is under my protection, that they are not to be harmed. It did not work very well, she said bitterly. No, he agreed, because the people hunting me do not respect my world. They want to burn it down, and now they believe you are part of it. They believe you are mine. Sarah flinched at the word, I am not yours. I know. His gaze softened. But they do not. You were right to refuse my help, Sarah. But that time has passed. You cannot go to work. You cannot stay here. Your landlord will be dealt with. Your family will be provided for, discreetly. But you must come with me, now. She looked at the broken lock. She thought of her mother's prescriptions. She looked out the window at the white van, still sitting there, a predator in the rain. She was not being offered a choice. She was being shown the reality of the cage she was already in. Where, she finally whispered? Somewhere no one can find you. He led her out the back, through a service tunnel she never knew existed. The scarred man, who had not spoken a word, melted away into the night, a black sedan, different from the one Mr. Bell had arrived in, was waiting in the alley. They drove for nearly an hour, heading north out of Baltimore, leaving the city glow behind. They spoke little. Sarah watched the landscape change from urban decay to dense, dark forest. Finally, they turned onto a narrow, unpaved road marked by a rusted no trespassing sign. The road ended at the sea. Perched on a high, rocky promontory, a structure pierced the skyline. It was a lighthouse, old, made of stone, dark against the pre-dawn sky. Point Calder, Matteo said, cutting the engine. The only sound was the crashing of waves far below. It has not guided a ship in 50 years. It is the safest place I know. It looked desolate, wild, and utterly, completely sealed off from the world, like a tomb or a fortress. Sarah could not decide which. Calder Light was not a home. It was a self-contained, vertical fortress. The stone walls, 3 feet thick, silenced the constant roar of the Atlantic, reducing it to a distant rumble. The interior was not the rustic ruin Sarah had expected. The lower levels had been converted with stark, modern efficiency. There was a small, well-stocked infirmary that looked better equipped than the ER that had stitched her up, a radio room bristling with antennae and glowing green screens, and a pantry in the sub-basement that could feed a small army for 6 months. It was a place built for sieges. But it was also a place of rigid rules. Posted on a clean whiteboard in the communal kitchen, no unsecured signals. All departures and arrivals logged. 3rd floor comms room is restricted. On her first morning, Matteo introduced his inner circle. They were not the brutes she had imagined. They looked more like a high-stress corporate startup. Gideon Vale was the first. He was thin, with sharp features and even sharper eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, dressed in a lawyer's impeccable pinstripes. Mr. Vale is our legal counsel, Matteo said simply. Gideon just nodded, his gaze analytical, as if he were already assessing Sarah's potential liability. Then came the woman who ran the radio room. This is Iris Cataneo. She manages our logistics, all of them. Iris was in her late 20s, her hair in a tight bun, fingers stained with what looked like toner ink. She gave Sarah a quick, assessing glance, devoid of malice but equally devoid of warmth. "Welcome to the Rock," Iris said, then immediately turned back to a server rack. Finally, there was the mountain who had been in Sarah's hallway. Noel Ruggieri, head of security. Noel, the scarred man, was cleaning a sophisticated-looking radio. He just grunted, but it seemed like a polite grunt. No one here was mafia in the way the movies showed. No one was loud or flashy. They were quiet, professional, and unnervingly competent. "You will be safe here," Matteo told Sarah, leading her to a small, clean room with a single bed and a view of the sea. "You can have anything you need." "What am I supposed to do?" Sarah asked, crossing her arms. "Just sit here, be your protected guest, your assistant, your—" She stopped, flushing, but the implication hung in the air. Matteo's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened slightly. "You are not a guest. Sarah, you are a non-combatant I am responsible for. You will do nothing." "No," she said, surprising herself with the force of her own voice. "I cannot do nothing. I will go insane, and I will not be a pink shadow who just existed. I will not be a kept woman, waiting for you to resolve things." She had seen the catering manifests in the kitchen, the logistics charts for the harbor. You feed the crews, the dock workers, the tugboat crews. That's part of your operation. He nodded, wary. "It is a service." "It is a mess," Sarah said, her diner manager instincts taking over. "Your supply chain is a disaster. You are overpaying for produce and your delivery routes are inefficient. Meh, I can do that. I know how to run a kitchen, how to manage inventory, how to get hot food to people on a deadline. It is what I did every night. Let me do that. Let me be useful. Not in on your business, but not useless either." Matteo stared at her for a long time. A flicker of genuine, uncalculated surprise crossed his features, replaced by something like respect. "Very well," he said. "You will be the new logistics manager for Portside Catering. It is one of our legitimate corporations." He set down a small velvet box. Inside, her gold coin sat cleaned, polished, and now drilled with a hole, strung on a simple, strong leather cord. "The conditions remain," he said, his voice firm. "You will wear this, always. It is not jewelry. It is for your identification and your safety. You will not go anywhere without Noel or someone he assigns, and your personal phone is gone. Iris will issue you a secured device. You can call your family on a shielded line once a week, but the calls will be monitored. Understood?" "And in return," Matteo said, "you will be paid a salary, a very good one, and a separate, substantial consulting fee will be paid from a legitimate logistics firm to your mother's account, covering her medical bills and your brother's tuition indefinitely." It was a golden cage, but it was the only cage on offer. Understood. In the following weeks, Sarah learned. She drove a gray Portside catering van, with Noel or another silent guardian in the passenger seat. She coordinated meal deliveries from a clean, industrial kitchen, not from the lighthouse, and she saw the Mortelli group for what it was. It was not just guns and shadows, it was Mortelli Cold Storage, which held 90% of the port's imported produce. It was M-Line Marine Insurance, the only company that would underwrite high-risk shipping in bad weather. It was the tugboat and salvage company that pulled crippled tankers out of the channel. Matteo Mancini did not just control the darkness, he owned the arteries of the port's legitimate as daylight commerce. But the whispers on the docks were getting louder. The longshoremen, the crane operators, the men she handed coffee and hot stew to, they were afraid. They spoke of a new player, Enzo Portanova. He wanted the red cobble yards, the last major terminal not under Matteo's influence. "He is a snake," one old tugboat captain told her, his voice low, "and he has got feds in his pocket. These new guys, Fodu, they call him, they are rough." The name made Sarah's stitches ache. One afternoon, while finalizing a manifest for a ship arriving from Georgia, she noticed an anomaly. A single container, listed as Savannah Fine Art, had been flagged for a priority, off-peak inspection. That was normal. But the inspection note was visual check only, bonded carrier. It was laughably lax. Portanova's name was on the associated import documents. Sarah's mind, trained by years of remembering 20 complex breakfast orders at once, captured the container ID instantly, locking it away SAVU 62219er 47. She mentioned it to Iris back at the lighthouse, noting the photo seal on the paperwork. It seemed easy, Sarah said. Iris's head snapped up from her console. What did you say? Sarah repeated the container ID and the photo note. Iris's face went pale. She grabbed Sarah by the arm and pulled her into the soundproof radio room. I've got to stop you right there, Iris said, her voice dropping to a furious whisper. Photo is not real. It is not a federal agency. There is no federal organized threats unit. It is a brand name. A brand name for what? For him, Iris said, typing furiously, pulling up a grainy surveillance photo of a man Sarah did not recognize. Enzo Portanova. He hired a dozen ex-cops and Blackwater types, bought them some shiny badges, and created a task force to legitimize his shakedowns. They are thieves with a costume. Sarah, they are how he is planning to hijack the port, one container at a time. The news traveled to Mateo. He was in the lantern room, the massive, dark lens of the lighthouse looming over them. He listened to Iris's report, his face carved from stone. The setting sun cast a red light across the room, making it look like he was bathed in blood. He was clearly challenged, his authority openly mocked by Portanova, but his response was not the explosion of anger Sarah would have expected. It was a cold, precise calm. He's using my own methods against me, Mateo said, his voice quiet, but with none of the subtlety. We should hit the container, Noel said from the doorway. Seize it. No, Mateo said. He was looking at Sarah. Portanova is loud, but he is not smart enough to invent photo. This alliance. It is too convenient. He has help. He turned back to the sea. They have an ear inside these walls. Someone told them about the diner. Someone is telling them our routes. We do not move. We do not start a war. Not until I know which one of us is the traitor. The container yard at midnight was a city of steel shadows, smelling of salt and rust. Sarah drove the catering van, with Noel silent and massive in the passenger seat. She had been on this route for 2 weeks, her presence becoming a normal sight. Tonight was different. As they passed row 41, a dark SUV with no markings cut them off, its high beams flashing, pinning them like an insect. 2 men in the same black photo windbreakers got out, hands on their holstered weapons. Turn off the engine, hands on the dash. Noel's hand drifted to his side. Sarah, he rumbled. Do as he says. She did. The 2 men approached, one on each side. The one at her window was the same man from the hospital. Well, well, he sneered, making the rounds. Get out of the van, both of you. We're just delivering food, Sarah said, her voice steady. Get out. They were forced out, pushed against the side of the van. The men were not interested in the food. They did not open the back. The lead agent ran his hands over Sarah, a rough, unprofessional search. He was not looking for a weapon. He felt the chain around her neck, under her shirt. There it is, he said, and yanked. The leather cord snapped. The gold coin lay in his palm, glinting under the yard lights. You have been busy. Have you not making friends? It's just a coin, Sarah lied, her heart hammering. Sure it is. He pocketed it. Tell your boss we said hello. Tell him. His protection is worthless. They got back in their SUV and sped off, leaving Sarah shaken, the empty leather cord cold on her skin. Noel opened the van door for her. They did not search the van, he said, his voice a low growl. They searched you. They wanted the coin. It was a test, Sarah whispered, her mind racing. It was just a test to see if I still had it, to see if I was still with him. Back at the lighthouse, she told Mateo. He was not angry. He was disturbingly calm. He simply nodded, as if confirming a theory. It was a lure, he said, his voice quiet, and you were the bait. I am sorry for that. He looked out the inky blackness of the ocean. I should have told you. The night at the diner, those men were not trying to kill me. Sarah stared at him. What you were shot at. They were trying to make me draw, Matteo said, turning to face her. The shooter, the man who grazed you. He was wearing a photo insignia. They had 2 witnesses across the street. The plan was for me to draw my weapon, to shoot him in self-defense. Then this photo, this fake agency, would have arrested me for murdering one of their officers. It was a setup to take me off the board, legally. The cold, calculated nature of it chilled her more than the shooting itself. How do you know? We found the shooter's car, but we did not know who he was until you were stopped tonight. Sarah's mind, the one that cataloged orders and faces, clicked. The cameras. The police only checked the diner's camera, but there's another one. The Blue Minnow, the sailor's bar across the street. Noel raised an eyebrow. That place, their camera's been busted for years. The red light on it is busted, Sarah corrected. I asked Sal at the diner about it once. The camera itself works. The bartender keeps it running to watch the parking lot. It sees the diner's front door. It sees the whole street. It took Iris less than an hour to retrieve the footage, pulling it from the bar's ancient, unsecured network. They watched it in the radio room. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 1 hour before the shooting. There was the photo shooter, the same one who had just stolen her coin, leaning against the bar's alley wall, smoking. A second man was with him, standing in the shadows. The man laughed, clapped the shooter on the shoulder, and for a moment, he stepped into the weak yellow light. Gideon Vale let out a sharp, choked noise. Iris's hand flew to her mouth. The man was Raffa Marchetti, Matteo's consigliere, his oldest friend, his right hand. Matteo Mancini did not move. He did not blink. He simply watched as the image of his most trusted man fraternized with the enemy. The air in the room became heavy, unbreathable, charged with a frozen, terrible anger. Matteo, Gideon started. Not a word, Matteo said, his voice lethally soft. A video proves a meeting. It does not prove the betrayal. I need the money trail. I need the why. He turned to Iris, his eyes black. The fine art container, the one Sarah flagged, it arrives tonight, Pier 27. We are going to look inside. The raid was silent. Matteo, Noel, and 2 others. Sarah was parked half a mile away, a lookout. Her radio tuned to their channel. She was not a part of their world, but she was tangled in it, and her mind was now a weapon they needed. She had the manifests, her diner-trained memory holding a dozen container codes. We are at the container, Noel's voice crackled. Seal code. Savu 6221947, she read off. It is a standard bolt seal. A pause. They were lazy. The code matches. Silence for several minutes. Then, Matteo's voice, tight with discovery. Sarah, they are not art. They are frames, empty picture frames, dozens of them lined with carbon fiber. To block scanners, Iris cut in on the channel. Perfect for smuggling data chips, ledgers. Headlights suddenly cut through the darkness, moving fast, not on the access road but cutting between the containers, a heavy-duty pickup truck, its engine roaring. Noel, Matteo, Sarah yelled into the radio. You have Company A pickup, dark blue, heading straight for your position. They are not slowing down. The warehouse door burst open. Noel dove out, rolling. The truck saw him, its tires screeching as it changed course, aiming to run him down. Sarah did not think. Her foot was already on the floor. The catering van shot forward, engine screaming. She yanked the wheel, crashing the heavy van directly into the side of the pickup. The sound of shearing metal was deafening. The impact threw her hard against her seatbelt, the pain in her ribs exploding anew. The truck was crippled. Its front axle snapped. Noel was on his feet, safe. 3 men boiled out of the truck. The fight was not a brawl. It was a precise, brutal, and short-lived event. Matteo and his team moved like surgeons. It was over in less than 30 seconds. As Noel secured the last man, he found what the driver had been clutching, a small, armored SSD drive. It was stamped with an eagle and the letters MACBA. Maritime Anti-Corruption Bureau, Gideon said, back at the lighthouse, looking at the drive. Another ghost organization. Iris slid the drive into an isolated terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The encryption is familiar. Same baseline as Portnova's shipping manifests. They are all using the same playbook. The screen flickered, then resolved into columns of numbers and names. "This is it," Iris whispered, her face pale. "It's a crypto ledger, payments. Look, Enzo Portnova's shell company, paying Fotu, paying a third party, codenamed Anvil, an Anvil." She trailed off, her blood seeming to run cold. "What is it, Iris?" Matteo demanded. "The payments from Anvil, they are going to Rafa." The betrayal was complete. It hung in the air, toxic and suffocating. "He built this," Matteo said, his voice a low vibration, devoid of all warmth. "He funded this. Portnova, Fotu. They are his puppets. He's using them to tear me down so he can take it all." He looked at the screen, at the proof of his friend's treachery. He was not just a mole, he was a kingmaker, and he was trying to crown himself. "We do not move yet," Matteo said, the cold calm returning to his face, more terrifying than any rage. "He has shown me his tools. Now I will see his endgame. The time to strike must be meticulous." The storm hit Point Calder not with a warning, but with a sudden, violent impact, as if the Atlantic had decided to punch the land. Rain and wind lashed the thick glass of the lantern room, which they had been occupying in silence for an hour. The weight of Rafa's betrayal, a cold, dense fog between them. Then, with a metallic groan and the sharp snap of a fuse, the lighthouse went dark. The emergency lights, battery-powered, failed to kick in. The generator, Matteo realized with a curse, had been set for maintenance that morning, a task delayed by the raid. They were plunged into absolute roaring blackness. The sound of the ocean, no longer muffled by the hum of electricity, was a deafening, chaotic monster. "Stay here," Matteo's voice commanded, close to her ear. She felt the brush of his coat as he moved. A beam from a small, powerful flashlight cut through the dark. "The main floor engine room. It is the most sheltered." He guided her down the winding iron staircase, his hand a firm, impersonal grip on her elbow. The old engine room was a tomb of cold, dormant machinery, but it was in the heart of the stone tower, its walls thick enough to dull the storm to a muted roar. He found a portable camp stove left by the maintenance crew and, with a click, lit a small, hissing blue flame. It cast a weak, ghostly light. Sarah rubbed her arms. Shivering, the cold was seeping up from the stone floor, a damp, penetrating chill that went straight to the bone. She was still in the light clothes she had worn in the van. Matteo watched her. He had been watching her ever since the footage of Rafa, his expression unreadable, his calm more frightening than any rage. Now, in the dancing light of the tiny stove, he seemed to shed his armor. Just for a second, he stripped off his heavy, dark wool coat, the same one from the diner. She realized and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, and it smelled of him cold air, expensive wool, and something uniquely, cleanly metallic. She pulled it tighter, but she was still trembling. As much from the accumulated tension as the cold, his hand, which had been settling the coat, paused. His fingers, calloused and warm, brushed the side of her shirt, just over the new puckered scar on her ribs. His touch, though accidental, was electric. She flinched, and his hand froze. He looked down, not at her face, but at where his hand rested. His gaze softened. The cold, strategic light in his eyes replaced by something human and unguarded. "It is healing," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It aches when the weather turns," she whispered, not moving. He did not pull his hand away, but his thumb brushed the fabric over the scar. A feather-light, involuntary caress. "I put you here, Sarah." "I'm still here," she replied, her voice shaky. The admission hung in the air. They were trapped by the storm, surrounded by a betrayal he could not yet fight, and lit by a single, fragile flame. "I am afraid," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out. "I'm afraid of this. Of you. I'm afraid of waking up and finding out I am just another one of your assets, a piece of property you are protecting." His eyes, dark pools in the flashlight's glow, found hers. "And I am afraid," he countered, his voice raw, "that you are the one thing I have not calculated for. For the first time in my life, I have lost control. My oldest friend is my enemy, my house is on fire, and you are the one person I cannot and should not have." The confession left them breathless. The small space was charged, the roar of the storm outside amplifying the sudden, intense silence between them. He leaned in, slowly. He was not moving to kiss her. He was just closing the distance, as if pulled by a force he no longer had the strength to fight. His forehead came to rest against hers. She could feel his warm breath, short and unsteady, against her lips. She did not pull away. Her own breath hitched. His hand, the one that had been on her side, slid up her back, strong and supportive, holding her, grounding her. Her own hands, cold and trembling, found the front of his shirt, then crept up to his collar, clinging as the lighthouse seemed to vibrate from a particularly violent gust of wind. She could feel the frantic, heavy beat of his heart under her palm, a rhythm that matched her own. "Is this okay?" he whispered, his lips barely brushing hers as he spoke. She could not form a full word. A small, broken sound escaped her. Yes. He did not take. He did not demand. The kiss was a hesitant question. It was light, a simple pressure of lips, a sharing of warmth in the cold. Then she responded, a tiny, almost imperceptible tilt of her head, and the kiss changed. It deepened, became mutual and sure. His hand on her back pulled her fractionally closer. It was not a kiss of passion, but of discovery, of two people finding a single, solid point in a world that was spinning apart. The heavy wool coat slipped from one of her shoulders, and his hand found the bare skin of her arm. His fingers splayed wide, the heat from his touch, a sudden sharp contrast to the cold air, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. When they finally broke apart, they did not move far. They just breathed, sharing the same air. He pulled a thick, wool-packed blanket from the emergency supplies and spread it on the floor. Close to the small stove, they sat, then lay on their sides, facing each other, not touching, just talking. She told him about her brother's stupid jokes. He told her about his father, a man who loved opera and taught him to tie a fisherman's knot. She admitted she hated the smell of burnt coffee. He admitted a strange, lifelong habit he could never, ever sleep with his back to a door. It was a small, intimate confession of the paranoia that defined his life. And for those few hours, as the storm raged, they were just two people. The morning came, gray and subdued. The storm had passed, leaving an exhausted, watery silence. The power was still out. The air in the engine room was thick with a new, warm awkwardness. Mateo was already up, making coffee on the camp stove, a process he was clearly unfamiliar with. He handed her a metal mug of the dark, steaming liquid. She took a sip. It was awful, bitter, watery and scalding. A small smile touched her lips. "You are a terrible barista, Mr. Mancini." He actually smiled. It was not the cold, assessing twist of his lips she had seen before. It was a real, unguarded, almost boyish smile that lit his eyes and changed his entire face. "I will keep that in mind." Later, as they walked up the staircase, they passed Iris, who was coming down, her face haggard from a night of monitoring the storm-damaged systems. She looked at Sarah, still wearing Mateo's coat. She looked at Mateo, who looked more rested than she had seen him in weeks. Iris did not say a word. She just gave Sarah a single sharp nod and a knowing wink. "Storms passed," she said, her voice dry. "But the sea's still rough. Be careful." The intimacy was real. It was acknowledged. At the top of the stairs, Mateo stopped her. He gently took the coat from her shoulders, but his hands lingered. "Sarah," he said. his voice serious again. "You are right. You are not my property. You do not belong to any seal or any coin." He met her gaze, his own clear and resolute. "You belong only to yourself. I will prove it to you, with actions, not words." Gideon Vale's face was the color of old parchment. He had been locked in the comms room with Iris for 36 hours, tracing the digital tendrils of Anvil. "It is worse than we thought," Gideon announced, his voice flat from exhaustion. He stood before Matteo and Sarah in the lighthouse's main room. Anvil is not just a code name. It is the Anvil Task Force, a private, for-profit security firm. They socialize law enforcement, meaning port tycoons and shipping magnates pay them to protect their interests. They are a ghost army, hired to bypass federal regulations. "They are mercenaries with a business license," Matteo stated. "Precisely," Gideon agreed. "And Rafa is not just their partner, he is their broker. He's using Port Nova and Fodu as a wrecking ball to scare the port, and then he will present Anvil as the only viable solution for security. He's not just taking over your territory, he is selling it." As if summoned by the betrayal, Sarah's secured phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, a text-only channel Iris had set up. The message was simple: "I know you are alive. I can protect you. The coin is the only thing he cares about. Bring it to me, and you can walk away. Your family will be safe." It was not signed, but it did not need to be. It was Rafa. "He thinks I still have the coin," Sarah said, her blood running cold. "The one the Fotu agents took." "He does not know his own pawn stole it," Matteo observed, his eyes narrowing. "He is desperate. He needs the original, the one he believes you have, to prove his loyalty." "He's playing everyone," Sarah said, but her mind was elsewhere. It was clicking, connecting details, the white van, the container manifests, the art, the Savannah art containers. They were not just for data chips. Iris looked up. "What do you mean?" "That van, the one I saw at the diner, Juliet Victor Tango 491. I ran the plate through the catering van's public registration check. It is registered to a shell company, owned by the Savannah River Queen Casino." Gideon's head snapped up. "The riverboat." "It is a floating cash laundering operation," Matteo said. "And," Sarah continued, her voice gaining confidence, "it hosts a massive charity gala every month, the Maritime Heritage Ball. I used to serve at it when I worked for a high-end caterer. It is this Friday. The art, the Fodu, the casino. It is all one network, and it is where they meet." A slow, dangerous smile touched Matteo's lips. "A heist." "A swap," Sarah corrected. "They are all high-level executives. They will have briefcases, data drives. Rafa will have his master ledger, the real one. We do not steal it, we swap it." The plan was audacious, and it was hers. One Matteo would attend the gala, a last-minute, high-profile donor. His presence, as Matteo Mancini of M-Line Insurance, would be a public statement, a distraction. Two Sarah would go undercover. She still had her old catering uniform. She would be a waitress, invisible. Her skills in observation now her greatest weapon. She would wear a microphone, a tiny dot in her ear. Three Iris would remain at the lighthouse, hacking the yacht's ancient, barely secured camera system, guiding them. The goal Iris had created a perfect duplicate of the SSD ledger Sierra and Noel had captured, but this one was loaded. It contained a digital signature that, when accessed, would create a new, undeniable money trail, one that painted Enzo Portanova and the Fodu as the masterminds and made Rafa look like their victim, while also linking all of them directly to Anvil's illegal domestic operations. They just needed to swap it for Rafa's original drive. The risk was enormous. If Fodu is there, Gideon warned, they are Anvil's private army. They do not have legal authority, but their guns are real. If they catch you, Sarah, they will not arrest you. They will detain you. And you, Sarah looked at Matteo, you will be in a room full of your enemies with no weapon. You have to be what you have never been, a politician. You cannot react. He just nodded. Let's go to the ball. The Savannah River Queen was a cathedral of crystal chandeliers and gold leaf paint, the air thick with perfume and the smooth sounds of a live jazz quartet. Sarah moved through the crowd, a tray of champagne glasses balanced on her palm, her movements automatic, her eyes scanning. Rafa is on the upper deck. Iris's voice whispered in her ear. VIP lounge. He's with Portanova. Sarah made her way up. She saw him. Rafa, smiling, holding a glass of whiskey, looking every bit the trusted consigliere. He was carrying a slim, black, carbon fiber briefcase. Matteo was on the main floor, surrounded, a shark pretending to be a dolphin. He was laughing, shaking hands with the same port tycoons who were paying Anvil to destroy him. "Sarah," Iris said, "Rafa is separating. He's heading to the stern." Sarah followed, her heart a drum against her ribs. She saw him at the railing, alone, checking his watch. This was her chance. She approached, tray extended. "Champagne, sir." As he turned, irritated, she tripped, lurching forward. The tray, the glasses, all went flying. "Oh, my goodness, I am so sorry." She grabbed a napkin from her apron, dabbing at his expensive suit jacket. "I am so clumsy. Sir, please forgive me." As she dabbed, her other hand, holding a small, pen-like UV marker, brushed the handle of his briefcase. She stepped back, mortified. Rafa just waved her away in disgust. "Get lost." "It is done," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking as she picked up the broken glass. "Good," Iris said. "Now, the swap. It has to be in the next 10 minutes. The main auction is starting. Matteo, it is your cue." Sarah watched from a service balcony as Matteo took the stage. He tapped the microphone. "Good evening." His voice boomed, smooth and confident. "It is an honor to be here, among so many visionaries." As he spoke, Sarah slipped into the men's VIP coat check, a small, unguarded room. "Iris, I see the briefcase. It is glowing." The UV light from her small keychain lit up the handle she had marked. "Hurry," Iris urged. "Rafa is getting agitated. He's checking his watch. Matteo cannot hold him forever." "He's talking about sustainable maritime security," Sarah whispered, her fingers fumbling with the identical briefcase she had hidden in a linen bag. "He's putting them to sleep." Her hands were shaking. She opened Rafa's case. There it was, the SSD. She pulled it out, her fingers sticky in her serving gloves, and slotted in the duplicate. She clicked the case shut. As she turned to leave, her glove snagged on the door handle. She pulled it free, a small, ripping sound. She looked down. The cheap white cotton glove now had a faint, flowery smell. Her laundry detergent, the one from the lighthouse. A scent no industrial catering company would ever use. There was no time. She ran. She was back on the main floor, tray in hand, when Rafa came striding out of the VIP room, his face like thunder. He was holding his briefcase. He walked right past her. But then he stopped. He turned. He sniffed the air. His eyes locked on her. He stared. Not at her face, but at her hands. He saw the white gloves. He knew. Before he could move, the yacht's horn blasted. They were docking. "We have to go," Iris said. "Sarah, move to the main exit, now." Sarah blended into the crowd. She saw Matteo at the foot of the gangplank, waiting. As she drew level with him, she saw them. The Fotu agents, 6 of them, pushing through the disembarking crowd, led by the same man who had stolen her coin. They did not go for Sarah. They went straight for Matteo. "Matteo Mancini," the agent shouted, his voice full of false authority. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy." "On what grounds?" Matteo asked, his voice impossibly calm. "On the grounds that we are arresting you." The agent grabbed Matteo's arms, pulling them behind his back, cuffing him. The crowd gasped. Rafa stood on the deck, watching, a small, triumphant smile on his face. He had won. As the agents pushed Matteo past her, his eyes found hers. The panic, the fear, the failure, it was all rising in her throat. He saw it, and in one brief, imperceptible movement, He looked past her, toward the street, and gave a single, sharp nod. Go. Continue the plan. Then he was gone, lost in the sea of flashing blue lights, and Sarah was left alone on the dock. The photo-marked SUV did not take Mateo to a police station. It sped through the industrial heart of the port, arriving at Concrete Warehouse 6, a massive, windowless block of a building. It was the registered address for the Anvil Task Force. They are inside. Iris's voice was tight. She was back at the lighthouse, her screen a web of city maps. He's moving. They are taking him to a sublevel. I still have a signal. How? Sarah asked, her voice shaking as she stood on the dark street corner, the briefcase containing Rafa's real SSD clutched in her hand. Noel was with her, a silent, grim shadow. The coin Rafa thinks he is chasing is worthless, Iris said. The one Mateo carries is in the lining of his shoe, a micro-tracker. He's in their fortress. Now, do your part. Sarah looked at the glass and steel skyscraper in front of her. Not the FBI, not the police. This was something else. Her catering van was parked 3 blocks away, a symbol of a life that felt like it was a century ago. She walked into the lobby. The plaque read, Interstate Racketeering Commission. It was not a federal agency. It was a specialist, multi-state task force, a council of state attorneys general who had been trying and failing to pin something on Anvil for years. They were lawyers with brass knuckles, and Sarah was about to make a deal with them. An hour later, she was in a sterile conference room with a woman in a severe gray suit. You are offering us the Anvil ledger, the woman said, her voice flat. In exchange for what? For him, Sarah said. Matteo Mancini, Anvil's FOTU task force, has him. They are holding him without charge in Warehouse 6. You know this. You have been waiting for this. We do not trade with organized crime, Miss Dalton. I am not organized crime, Sarah shot back, her fear replaced by a cold, hard anger. I am a waitress, and you are not the police. You are a political weapon. You want Anvil. I have the key to their kingdom. You get their books, you get Portanova, you get everything in exchange. I want a person for a document. You move, now. And you take Mr. Mancini into civilian oversight. You get him out of Anvil's hands. That is the deal. Or I walk, and I burn this drive. The woman's eyes glittered. You are playing a very dangerous game. I have nothing left to play with. The woman picked up her phone. We have a green light on the warehouse. Execute. The news hit Rafa's network within minutes. The IRC, a rival power, was moving on Anvil. His plan was unraveling. He did not know Sarah had the real drive. He believed she was just a loose end, a complication. But now, with the IRC involved, he realized the swap must have happened. He had the fake drive, and Sarah had the original. He found her as she was walking to Noel's car, his own men. Not FOTU, but hard-eyed men loyal to him. Not Mateo. Grabbed her. You are making a mistake, Rafa, she yelled, as they threw her into a car. Am I? Rafa's voice was cold from the front seat. You are a smart girl. Sarah. Too smart. You think you can trade my life's work for him, the ledger? Where is it? It is safe, she hissed, as the car sped toward the red cobble yards. He took her to the top, up the rattling service elevator of a gantry crane. They were 100 feet in the air, on a narrow steel walkway. The port city was a carpet of lights below them, the wind screaming. You have 10 seconds, Rafa snarled, pushing her toward the edge. The drive. It is locked, she screamed, her mind racing, buying seconds. It is encrypted. It is tied to a failsafe, a voice recognition key, Mateo's. Only his voice can open it. If you kill me, if you kill him, the file self-corrupts, and you get nothing. Anvil will crucify you. Rafa stared at her, his face a mask of fury, his calculations turning. He wanted to kill her, but her bluff was good. It was believable. You are lying. Am I try it? Go on. You have failed, Rafa, and now everyone knows. His hand went to his radio. Enzo. He growled. She is here. But there is a complication. A new sound, a loud, metallic groaning. From the next crane over, a massive container hook, large as a car, was swinging toward them, moving through the dark. Noel was in the operator's cab 200 yards away, and Iris was on the radio, guiding his hands. "Now, Sarah," Iris screamed in her ear. Sarah drove her elbow into the guard's stomach and ran. The container hook smashed into the walkway, shattering the railing where she had been standing. Flares shot up from the ground Noel's team, creating a diversion. Rafa fired 2 shots, the bullets pinging off the steel around her. She leaped onto the hook as it swung back. Noel reeled her in, a chaotic, terrifying ride through open air. Rafa scrambled down the ladder, a shadow escaping into the maze of containers below. As he ran, his radio was still on, an open channel. Sarah, clinging to the hook, heard his frantic voice. "Enzo, the plan is blown. The IRC has the warehouse. Meet me on the Serafina. Midnight, I have to get the original." The girl's lying. He was gone. In the downtown IRC office, the woman in the gray suit looked at the data streaming from the SSD Sarah had given her. "It is a start," she said. "We can move on some assets. Freeze accounts, but this drive, it is a copy. To make this stick, to bring down Anvil's entire charter, we need the original, the one Rafa is now clutching like a rosary." A side door opened. 2 IRC agents walked in, escorting Mateo. He was not in cuffs, but he looked exhausted, and there was a heavy, black device clamped around his ankle. He looked only at Sarah. "You are safe." "They let you go," she whispered, rushing to him. "A deal," Mateo said, his voice grim, tapping the electronic monitor on his ankle. "Civilian oversight, I am on a leash. For your sake, I accepted." He looked at the IRC woman. "She did this. For you, but I am not finished." He turned back to Sarah, his eyes dark with a resolve that frightened her. "Rafa, Enzo, the Serafina, I am ending this tonight." The lighthouse felt like a tomb. Mateo was at the large map table, the electronic monitor a heavy, cynical black box on his ankle, its red light a constant, insulting blink. The IRC had released him, but he was a prisoner, and the Serafina rendezvous was less than 24 hours away. "You should not have done it," a voice cut through the tense silence. A woman stood in the archway, her face a perfect feminine echo of Mateo's, but where his features were carved from calm stone, hers were all fire and sharp edges. She was Bianca Mortelli, his sister. She had not been to the lighthouse in over a year. She ignored Sarah completely, her eyes fixed on her brother. "You let them put a chain on you, a dog collar. For what?" Her gaze slid to Sarah, dripping with contempt. "For her, you let Rafa, a man who ate at our father's table, tear us apart because you were distracted by a waitress." "Bianca," Mateo's voice was low, a warning. "No," she spat. "I will not be quiet. This is our family, our legacy, and you are letting it burn. You brought an outsider into this fortress, and now the walls are coming down. You have gone soft, Mateo." She turned and stalked out. Sarah could feel the poison of her words, the truth and the injustice of them, hanging in the air. Later that afternoon, Bianca found Sarah on the High Widow's Walk, staring at the gray sea. Her approach was different now. The fire was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate sincerity. "He will not listen to me," Bianca said, standing beside her. "He looks at you, and he cannot see the empire his father built." "I did not ask for any of this," Sarah said. "I know." Bianca's voice softened. "You are the only one who can save him from himself. He's going to war with Anvil tomorrow. For you, he's going to get himself killed. But I have information, a way out, for him, for us." "What information?" "Not here," Bianca said, her eyes scanning the lighthouse. "Too many ears, too many of Iris's microphones. Meet me, alone. The old Mortelli warehouse on Pratt Street, 8 o'clock. Help me save him. Sarah. You owe him that much." Sarah's heart screamed it was a trap, but her gut, The part of her that saw the broken woman behind the anger said it was a desperate, final plea. She arrived at 8. The warehouse was cavernous, smelling of dust and old coffee beans. Bianca stood in a single pool of light. "He's planning to burn it all down, is he not?" Bianca said. "The entire business, all for you." "He's trying to stop the violence," Sarah said. "Violence is what built this," Bianca's voice cracked. "This empire, this darkness you hate. It is the only thing that has ever kept our family safe. It is a fortress, and without it, we are just targets. I will not let him destroy us. I made a deal." Sarah's blood went cold. "A deal with Enzo." "Co-rule," Bianca said, her chin high. "It is better than ashes." "He is lying to you," Sarah said, her voice quiet. She pulled out her phone. "Iris decrypted the rest of the ledger, the one you thought was fake. This is a message. Bianca, from Enzo to Rafa, from 2 days ago." She held up the phone. The encrypted text was open. "Once M is gone, silence B. No loose ends." Bianca stared. "B... what? What is B?" "It is you, Bianca," Sarah whispered. "He's using you to get to Matteo, and then he is going to kill you." The color drained from Bianca's face, the iron certainty, the righteous anger. All of it crumbled, leaving a terrified, lost woman. She looked at the phone, at her own death warrant, and hesitated. "A touching family reunion." Rafa stepped from the shadows, flanked by 2 anvil men. His wrist was in a brace. "But you are both too late." Bianca's face was a mask of betrayal and self-loathing. You were waiting for me." "You were the bait," Rafa sneered, ignoring her, his eyes on Sarah. "Enzo will be disappointed in your failure. Bianca, now, you..." He pointed at Sarah. "The original SSD and the coin. The first one, the Senyo, a new boss needs the old symbols. Give them to me." "I do not have them," Sarah said. "They are at the lighthouse." "Then we will all go back together." At the lighthouse, Iris's monitor lit up. "Sarah's tracker, she's at the Pratt warehouse, but Bianca's tracker is there, too. And, oh, God, a third group. Anvil signatures. It is Rafa. He has them both." Matteo looked at the red, blinking light on his ankle. He did not say a word. He walked to the comms room, took a massive neodymium hard drive magnet from the supply shelf, and slammed it onto the monitor. The device whined, the light sputtering. "Gideon," he said, his voice hard, "call the IRC. Tell them I am off the leash. Tell them to send a cleanup crew to Pratt Street." With Noel's help, he used a signal jammer and a small pry bar. The monitor sparked, then cracked open. Matteo ripped it from his leg and threw it to the floor. "Noel, we're going in." They entered the warehouse not like soldiers, but like ghosts. From the roof, they dropped into the mezzanine as Rafa was pushing the women toward the door. It was short. Noel was a shadow, disabling the 2 guards with brutal efficiency. Matteo moved for Sarah. Rafa saw him. He turned, his gun already in his hand. He fired. Matteo saw it coming. He threw himself forward, shoving Sarah hard against a stack of pallets. The bullet ripped through the meat of his shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground, but he was already pushing himself up, his other hand reaching for his own weapon. Rafa raised his gun for the kill shot. "No!" Sarah screamed. She was beside a pile of old catering supplies. Her hand found the handle of a heavy, cast-iron skillet. She did not throw it. She swung it, low and fast, a desperate, horizontal arc, all her weight behind it. The iron slammed into Rafa's broken wrist. He shrieked, a sound of pure agony, and the gun clattered to the concrete. He clutched his ruined hand, his face pale with shock. He looked up, and his eyes widened. Bianca! She'd picked up one of the guards' guns. She was aiming it, her hands shaking violently. "Do it, Bianca," Rafa gasped. "Shoot him, it is ours, it is all ours." Bianca looked at Rafa, the man who had ordered her death. She looked at Matteo, bleeding on the floor, trying to get to his feet. She looked at Sarah, who was trembling, the pot still in her hand. She made her choice. She fired, but she aimed at the ceiling. The concrete dust rained down. "Enough!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "It is enough, no more." The standoff was broken. Rafa, seeing his last ally turn, did not wait. He scrambled, clutching his arm, and bolted, disappearing through a fire exit into the night. Noel started after him. "No," Matteo grunted, pulling himself up. "Let him go." Sarah rushed to him, grabbing a clean cloth, pressing it to his shoulder. "He's getting away." "Yes," Matteo said, his voice strained, the blood soaking his shirt. He is going to Enzo. He's going to the Serafina. Tomorrow night. He just confirmed the appointment." Later, back at the lighthouse, Gideon stitched the wound. Bianca sat alone, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the floor. "We can win this," Noel said, his voice low. "We hit the Serafina. We get the ledger. We can rebuild. We can take Anvil's place." Matteo looked at Sarah, at the blood on her hands, at the exhaustion in her eyes. He thought of his sister, broken. He thought of Rafa, consumed. "No," Matteo said. The room went silent. "We are not rebuilding," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Bianca was right. This empire, it is a monster. It eats its own. It ate Rafa. It almost ate her. And it is trying to eat Sarah. We are not saving the Mortelli group. We are ending it. Tomorrow night, we are not going to war. We are going to a funeral. We are burning the whole thing to the ground." The storm did not just arrive, it detonated. The Serafina lunged out of the black, driving rain, a ghost ship docking 5 hours ahead of schedule. Its foghorn a mournful groan against the wind. The giant gantry cranes of the red cobble yards were shrieking, the massive steel structures vibrating, shaking off rust and ice in the gale. This was not an operation. It was a theater of chaos. Matteo's team, small and elite, was indistinguishable from the IRC agents, all dressed as dock workers, shadows in the downpour. Sarah was not a shadow. She was a giant. She was thrown 90 feet in the air, her hands steady on the joysticks of a straddle carrier. It was a skill she had learned on her lunch breaks, charming an old yard mechanic named Pops into teaching her. Now, she was playing a shell game with 20-ton steel boxes, the massive machine moving like a spider on legs, lifting and shifting. She moved the container designated for the meeting, a trap loaded with IRC surveillance, into a slot 3 rows over, retagging its location in the manifest with Iris's remote help. A convoy of black SUVs sliced through the puddles. Enzo Portanova arrived, flanked by 6 Anvil men, their tactical gear a stark contrast to the rough dock workers. Rafa was waiting, his arm in a sling, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. The briefcase was chained to his good wrist. He and Enzo exchanged brief, harsh words. The briefcase was unlocked. It was handed over. Enzo opened it. He saw the SSD. He smiled. "And in the cab of her crane," Sarah whispered into her mic, "he has it." Iris's voice, calm from the lighthouse, said, "The chip is active. He's pinging. The trap is set." A single red flare shot up from the warehouse, arcing over the Serafina. It was the signal. All hell broke loose. The IRC observers, no longer incognito, moved in. Anvil reacted, drawing weapons, turning the yard into a war zone. Flares lit the sky, casting red, demonic light on the rain. A ship's horn blasted, a long, continuous wail of panic. A support cable on a nearby crane, overloaded by the wind, snapped. It was thick as a man's arm, and it slammed into the concrete near them, sending a shower of debris and shrapnel flying. Matteo, his shoulder already wounded, did not hesitate. He grabbed Sarah, who had just scrambled down from the carrier, and threw himself on top of her, his body taking the full impact of the flying concrete shards. He cried out, a sharp, choked sound. "No!" she screamed, rolling him over. His back was bleeding, a fresh, dark stain spreading through his jacket. "Matteo!" He was breathing in short, harsh gasps, the pain threatening to pull him under. She pressed her forehead to his, her own tears mixing with the rain on his face. Her voice was a desperate, shaking whisper. Don't you dare leave me in this storm. Do you hear me?" He looked at her, his eyes dark with pain but incredibly clear. A small, tired smile touched his lips, a grimace of effort. "Never," he breathed. "Noel, get Bianca out," Iris's voice shrieked over the comms, a new panic in her tone. Noel, emerging from the chaos, grabbed Bianca's arm and dragged her behind a stack of steel beams, shielding her with his body just as a burst of automatic fire stitched the air. "Iris now," Matteo ordered, his voice a low growl. "Broadcasting," Iris said, her voice cold as ice. "The full ledger, the Anvil contracts, the FOTU payment logs, it is live. Every news outlet, every attorney general on the East Coast, it is done." Enzo Portanova heard it on his own radio, a lieutenant screaming that their servers were on fire, that the IRC was seizing their assets. He looked at the briefcase in his hand. He looked at Matteo, wounded. He looked at Sarah. He realized he had lost. With a roar, he grabbed Sarah, yanking her up by her arm, pressing the muzzle of his gun to her temple. "We are leaving," he screamed, dragging her toward the gantry crane's access ladder. "Everyone stands down or she dies." Matteo roared, pushing himself to his feet, ignoring the blood, and followed. Enzo dragged her up the rungs. High above the shipyard, the wind threatened to peel them from the metal. They were on the narrow bridge, 100 feet up, the steel whining. "You have nothing," Matteo yelled from the ladder below, climbing, his bad arm making each movement an agony. "I have her!" Enzo screamed back, pulling Sarah tighter. "You have a fake!" Sarah gasped, her voice shrill with a sudden, wild adrenaline. Enzo froze. "What?" You idiot," she screamed, the wind tearing the words from her lips. You have been fighting over a decoy. The briefcase Rafa gave you. It is a fake." "You are lying." "Am I?" she cried. "The real ledger, the original SSD I swapped it last night, when Rafa had me. He was so stupid, so desperate, he did not even check. I swapped his briefcase for one I had made, one Iris packed with a dummy drive and a tracker." Enzo stared at her, his mind reeling. "And the real one," Sarah continued, her voice rising in a wild, triumphant bluff. "The original it is sitting in an IRC vault right now, and the key, Enzo. The key is your voice. I used the audio from your speech at the casino gala. It is voice-locked. You are the only man in the world who can open it, and the only man who will be in the room with the feds when you do. You lost. Enzo. You lost before you even got here." The rage that consumed him was absolute. It was not the cold calculation of a boss. It was the primal fury of a man who had been outplayed, outsmarted by a waitress. He roared, his hand leaving her head, pulling back to strike her, to throw her from the bridge. It was the opening she needed. Sarah did not wait. She dropped her weight, stomping on his instep, and dove sideways, rolling under the rail. She slipped, her hands grabbing, catching a lower support beam. She was hanging, dangling, 100 feet above the concrete. Enzo turned, raising his gun to shoot her, but Matteo was there. He had made the climb. He crashed into Enzo, a single desperate tackle. Enzo was too slow. He looked at Matteo, at the blood, at the rage in his eyes, and he slipped on the wet steel. He fell. Matteo did not watch him. He was already on his stomach, his arm straining, his hand reaching down into the void. "Sarah, take my hand." His hand, covered in his own blood, found hers. He pulled, his muscles screaming, and dragged her up. Over the rail, they did not stand. They collapsed onto the wet steel, a tangle of limbs, rain and blood. Seconds later, the walkway was flooded, not with rain, but with light, dozens of flashlights, bright and blinding. The IRC tactical team, their uniforms now clear, swarmed the platform. "It is over, Matteo," the lead agent said, her voice respectful, as she helped him sit up. Matteo just held on to Sarah, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking. "It is over," he whispered. just for her. The storm had passed, leaving the harbor in a state of cold, damp clarity. The final cleanup was not about violence. It was about paperwork and consequences. Rafa was found trying to flee the country, not with a fake passport, but with a false sense of authority. He was apprehended at a private airfield, attempting to buy a plane. When Noel and 2 IRC agents cornered him, Rafa, desperate, pulled out the gold coin the FOTU agent had stolen from Sarah. He held it up to Noel. "You answer to this, you answer to me. Stand down." Noel just looked at him with pity. "That coin has been a dead signal for weeks. Rafa, Iris deactivated its significance the moment it was stolen." As if on cue, Iris, present via a speakerphone held by an agent, played the audio. The grainy sound of Rafa's voice, colluding with Enzo, promising Anvil the entire port, filled the sterile hangar. Rafa's face, already pale, crumpled, the last vestige of his power, the symbol he had killed for, was just a piece of metal. The digital tidal wave Iris had unleashed was devastating. The IRC, armed with the original ledger that Sierra's bluff had secured, publicly declared the Federal Organized Threats Unit and the Anvil Task Force as fraudulent criminal enterprises. Their assets, billions held in offshore accounts and shell companies, were frozen. Enzo Portanova, recovering in a hospital under armed guard, was facing a battery of state and federal charges that would ensure he never saw a harbor again. Mateo's war was over, but his reckoning had just begun. He sat in the IRC conference room, his shoulder bandaged, Sarah at his side. The deal was clean, brutal, and total. He provided a full, unvarnished confession, detailing the gray operations of the Mortelli Group, in exchange for his testimony, which dismantled a dozen corrupt port authorities. He signed the dissolution papers. The Mortelli Group, as his father had built it, ceased to exist. In its place, he signed the charter for the Harbor Light Trust, a legitimate fund dedicated to port labor protection and maritime infrastructure. The IRC, respecting his complete cooperation, granted him a suspended sentence. He was free, but his empire was gone. Bianca's testimony was the key to unlocking the art world money laundering. She faced her own hearing, not with defiance, but with a quiet dignity Sierra had not seen before. She received community supervision, agreeing to enter a witness program to help the IRC untangle the complex web of shell companies. "My whole life," she told Sierra, packing a small bag at the lighthouse, "I was taught to keep things, to hold the walls, I think. I am ready to learn how to build something instead." Weeks later, the lighthouse felt different. It was no longer a fortress, just a home. The air was clean, the tension gone. Mateo found Sarah on the Widow's Walk, watching the sunset. He did not come empty-handed. He held out a small box. Sarah's breath caught. "It is not what you think," he said quickly. She opened it. Inside, it was not a diamond. It was the original gold coin, the M facing up, but it had been changed. It was thinned, smoothed, and set into a simple brushed gold band. It was a ring. He took her hand. "The coin I slipped into your pocket. It was a marker of ownership, a sign that you belong to my world." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "This," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard, "is the opposite. This is not a mark of possession. This is a promise that my life is, from this day forward, bound inextricably to your freedom." Sarah did not want the lighthouse life, not fully. She wanted the harbor. She used the back pay and the consulting fees Mateo had provided, not to run, but to invest. The Harbor Light Diner, shuttered since the shooting, was for sale. Sarah bought it, but she reopened it under a new charter, the Harbor Light Cooperative, owned and operated by its employees. She was back behind the counter, but this time, she was the boss. And so was everyone else. Mateo worked outside the city, building his new life. He founded a maritime security firm, legitimate from the ground up. His first clients were not shadow corporations, but the newly formed Atlantic Stevedores Union Cooperative, signing transparent public contracts for port safety and logistics management. He was still a boss, but one who worked in the light. The nights were quiet now. One clear, star-filled evening, Mateo found her locking up the diner. He drove her not to the lighthouse, but to the roof of the co-op's new warehouse, overlooking the sleeping port. He turned on the radio in his truck. A slow, old song drifted out. He held out his hand. "May I?" They danced, not with the frantic energy of survival, but with the slow, easy rhythm of people who had time. His arms were around her, his bad shoulder long since healed. Her head rested on his chest. There, under the moon. They kissed, slow and deep, a kiss of quiet certainty. Their hands were clasped, fingers intertwined. "We choose this," he whispered against her hair. "We choose each other, every day." The next morning, Sarah was up before dawn, prepping the coffee machine for the morning rush. Taped to the grinder was a handwritten note, her mother's familiar, elegant script. "My daughter," it read, "your freedom is not found in running from your past. It is found in having the courage to choose your future." Sarah smiled, folding the note, placing it in her apron pocket. She turned the sign on the door to open. The news played on the small TV in the corner. The sentences were announced. Enzo Portanova, 45 years, federal. Rafa Marchetti, 20, for conspiracy, racketeering, and his cooperation. The IRC formally announced the dissolution of the Mortelli Group and the public seizure of the Red Cobble Yards, which was being turned over to a community-run Port Authority board. The chain was broken. The sun was rising. From the diner window, Sarah could see the distant flash of Calder Light, which Mateo had kept operational as a private historical landmark. It turned. Slow and steady, guiding the first commercial vessel into the newly reformed harbor. Mateo's truck pulled up. He got out, not in a wool coat, but in a simple work shirt, carrying 2 coffees. He leaned against the diner window, waiting for her break, and they stood together, watching the sun hit the water. No more blood, no more debts, just the promise of a life that was legal, intense, and finally, wonderfully gentle. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you're listening from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting the hype button to help this story reach more listeners.